You're on.
Hello and welcome to the Round 2 Small Business Vouchers webinar. We're going to wait just a moment or two more. I see people are still joining, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Mike Paulus. I'm coming to you from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And today I'd like to talk with you about the Round 2 of the Small Business Voucher Pilot. The slides I'm sharing with you were largely created by Sarah Truitt, who is a colleague at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So things I'd like to go over today. First, review the Small Business Voucher Pilot goals, purpose, and background. I think many of you may be coming back from Round 1, so this is likely to be a bit of a review. We'll then do a brief review of the Round 1 results, talk about the schedule and logistics for Round 2. Then I would like to walk through the slightly modified outline for the request for assistance. We'll then talk about the scoring, the submission process, and then we'll have time for some question and answer. So let's begin with the background and purpose of the Small Business Voucher. So the purpose of this program is to provide small businesses with access to the resources of the national laboratories to help selected U.S. businesses solve clean energy problems important to their business plans. We'd like to make it easier for companies to access the national laboratories. And to learn more, please join our webpage at www.sbv.org. So if you're a small businessman or a small business person, you know this. Small businesses are major drivers of the United States economy. 23 million businesses representing 99% of all employers and account for half of all of the private sector jobs. One of the goals of a national laboratory certainly is to have economic impact for the taxpayers who support these institutions. And for that to happen, we need to effectively engage with the small businesses. And so the Small Business Voucher Pilot is an effort to better connect the national laboratories with small businesses so that we can work with you to achieve economic impact in the United States. Now, it's not always easy for a small business to access the national laboratory. National laboratories are not inexpensive, and some small businesses struggle to find the resources to collaborate or to fund work here. The contracting process is largely a gift to us from legislators in Washington, and anything created by a bureaucratic agency certainly will have some length associated with contracting. And sometimes the labs, particularly from the outside, can appear to be a little bit opaque and difficult to navigate. And so we're making efforts to address these challenges in terms of the first, with the ability to afford access to the laboratory. The Department of Energy has provided funding for up to 100 vouchers. Notionally, it could be more or less, so that it eases that financial challenge to collaborate with the laboratory. We're working very hard to streamline the back-end business practices to shorten the contracting process, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And we're implementing a concierge service to help small businesses navigate the entire lab system by technology area so that it's a little bit easier to come into the laboratory, find a researcher who works in a space that you're interested in, and then begin to put together a collaborative opportunity. As you probably know, the national laboratories are really a significant resource for the nation, particularly in clean energy research. There's 17 national laboratories comprising 66,000 employees. And one metric of the impact these labs have had is there are more than 50 Nobel laureates who have passed through the laboratories. DOE selected 5 national labs to collaborate with it to put together this pilot program. And those are the Berkeley National Lab, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and Sandia National Laboratory. So these are the lead labs, but you actually have the potential to access any of the laboratories in the system. And certainly one of our goals is to put together a program that facilitates access to all of the laboratories. So what kinds of work can you do? Well, first of all, it's very important to note that the funding for the Small Business Voucher Program comes to us through the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office of the Department of Energy. And so the work that we do needs to be aligned with the mission of that office. And so those areas are advanced manufacturing, bioenergy, buildings, fuel cells, geothermal, solar, water power, wind, and vehicles. And we'll talk more about this, but it will be important as you prepare your request for assistance that there's a clear alignment between the work that you want to do and one of these technology areas. Now, what kinds of things can you do at a laboratory? Well, you could certainly work with the lab for prototyping, for materials characterization, for high performance computation, modeling and simulation, intermediate scaling to general samples for potential customers, validation of technology performance, or designing new ways to satisfy regulatory compliance. At the end of the day, we have very smart people in the laboratories with wonderful scientific and analytical capabilities, and we can put the capabilities and the intelligence of these folks to work to help you solve your problem. So let's talk about round one. Several hundred requests for assistance came in, and from them, 33 vouchers were awarded with a total value of $6.7 million. And if we look at the technology areas, you can see that they're all covered. Advanced manufacturing awarded 6 vouchers, bioenergy awarded 2, buildings awarded 4, fuel cells awarded 7, geothermal and solar each awarded 2, vehicles awarded 7, water awarded 2, and wind awarded 1. So that's the results of the first program. It was very competitive. Here are some general observations. Again, a very competitive process. A lot of very good requests for assistance were not able to be funded simply because of availability of resources and the fact that we wanted to leave vouchers available for rounds 2 and 3. As I mentioned earlier, it's critically important that your request for assistance be clearly aligned with one of the technology areas. We found that in general, the problem statements in round 1 scored very well. The reviewers were typically familiar with the technology areas and they paid attention to feasibility and scope. But the problem statement scored well, and it was scored well by reviewers who were experts in the technology space. In general, the team qualifications and experience scored well. If there was an in-kind contribution planned, then the team needed to have the expertise and resources to perform the planned in-kind work. Where we saw variability was in the impact scores. We found that companies often didn't do as well as they did in other areas describing the positive impact that would result from a successful small business voucher project. And one of the bits of feedback that we had from the reviewers was in describing positive impact, typically descriptions that directly impact the company and their ability to execute in the marketplace were more compelling than broader descriptions of impact in the broader market. And we found that in general, the deployment plans scored a bit lower than other criteria. The very good deployment plans demonstrated an understanding of the market and provided enough detail to make it believable that the company would be able to execute on its deployment plan. So that's a bit of feedback from round 1, and I hope it'll be useful as you prepare your round 2 vouchers. So let's talk a bit about the schedule and logistics for round 2. As you know, the small business voucher is intended to be a 3-round program. We just began work on projects that were put in place in February 2016. So round 1 ran from September to February. We just kicked off round 2. We will have a 1-month proposal preparation time, and then we'll go into the steps of doing merit reviews, obtaining DOE approval, finalizing agreements, and starting work. And we expect that work will begin on vouchers from round 2 as early as late July, most likely early August if the schedule holds. And round 3 will open in May of 2016. And you notice in this case, there's going to be a little bit of overlap between rounds 2 and 3, and that's to make sure that we're able to put the funding in place in the time that DOE requires. The actual date of the round 3 opening is still a little bit in play, and we'll certainly keep you posted, and please keep an eye on the Small Business Voucher webpage to see when that will happen. So here's a look at the timeline. Based on experience with round 1, we expect this to be about a 20-week cycle from closing to signed agreement. The announcement went out on March 10th. This is very important. The RFAs are due by 11:59 Eastern Daylight Time, April 10th. And that will be a hard shutoff time. So the tool will stop accepting vouchers just before midnight on April 10th or just before the start of April 11th. So once that closes, it's closed, and we really don't have the flexibility to reopen to let late ones in. So I encourage you to submit your request for assistance, maybe even a day or two early to avoid any unforeseen problems. Then in mid to late June, we'll notify semifinalists that they have been selected to continue through the review process. And I'll talk in a moment about what it means to be a semifinalist. And then in late June, early July, the semifinalists will begin working with lab staff to describe the actual work that will be performed under the voucher. And then those statements of work, along with the request for assistance, will be evaluated by the Department of Energy, and we'll find out in mid to late July who has been selected for award negotiation. And then we'll complete the negotiation of those contracts. The expectation is that any finalists will be able to do work with us under a small business voucher, the caveat being that they do need to accept the terms of the contracts, and we'll describe those in a moment. And then the work again begins in August 2016. The vouchers can have up to a 12-month period of performance, and this is important. By signing up for a voucher, you do sign up for answering periodic questions from an external team that is going to help us evaluate the success of the program for a period of 5 years so that we can learn from this experiment and hopefully improve it as we go forward. So what does it mean to be an applicant, a semifinalist, or a finalist, or an awardee? Well, you become an applicant when you submit your request for assistance before the deadline, before the tool closes on April 10th. Then there will be a review by external experts in the technology spaces to select companies to prepare statements of work. And this will be a two-step review. First, the external reviewers will review your request for assistance, and then the technology offices at the Department of Energy will review them. And that dual review process should get us to the top 10 to 15% of the request for assistance. And those companies will be invited to prepare a statement of work in collaboration with the National Laboratory. The semifinalists with their lab partner then submit their statements of work to the Department of Energy for final review, and the finalists are selected from that pool. We expect for there to be 30 to 35 vouchers selected from that pool. And it is not unlikely that the DOE program offices may request modifications to these statements of work to make sure that the work being done is aligned with their mission. And then awardee will be a company that has successfully completed a CRADA or TAPA agreement with the National Laboratory. So a point I really want to make with you is it's critically important that you study the notice of opportunity. If in reviewing the round one request for assistance, if there was a consistent shortcoming, it would be cases where the applicants put together a nice proposal, but it just wasn't aligned with the requirements of the notice of opportunity. So I really want to encourage you to read and pay attention to the requirements described in that document. And we have a link at the bottom, but really all you have to do is go to the webpage, sbv.org, and you can find your way quickly to the notice of opportunity. In that notice, you'll find specific technology areas and the available funding levels. You'll find a detailed description of the merit review criteria and the weighting. You'll also find the terms and conditions of these standard agreements. We'll talk about this later, but I want to point out that one of the provisions of the small business voucher is that by applying, you agree that you will accept the standard terms and conditions of these contracts. And I can tell you that the National Laboratories and the legal office at the Department of Energy worked hard to make these the most pro-business or liberal terms that we could put together. So the intent is for this first offer to be a best offer in terms of what we can do with the CRADA and TAPA terms and conditions. The notice of opportunity also describes the reporting requirements. It describes the cost share requirements, and then it provides a template for the request for assistance. Okay, what does it mean to be eligible for this program? Well, to be eligible, you must be a small business in the United States. The definition is that it must be a for-profit business, must have fewer than 500 employees worldwide, and it must be U.S. based and U.S. owned. And I need to point out that if you are a small business, wholly owned subsidiary, or majority owned subsidiary of a large business, then you qualify as a large business, not as a small business. We've touched on a number of these, but again, to be considered for a voucher, you have to commit to provide a 20% cost share, commit to report evaluation data for 5 years, certify that the assistance requested is not readily available in the private sector. That goes to the fact that national laboratories are by law not allowed to compete with the private sector. Agree to one of the 2 non-negotiable agreements, and products embodying the intellectual property developed under this agreement must be substantially manufactured in the United States. We've talked now several times about the standard agreements. The first is a non-negotiable CRADA, and this is to be used in cases where there's going to be likely the development of intellectual property and where both parties will collaborate. So if the company proposes to meet the cost share via a in-kind contribution of effort, then that's a collaboration, and the CRADA is the document that we use. On the other hand, if the company wishes to provide its cost share either by cash or by providing materials or equipment to be used and will not collaborate, then the Technology Assistance Pilot Agreement, or TAPA, is the agreement of choice. The IP language in both agreements is the same, and this is important. This is fairly rare. The small business is granted a paid-up, royalty-free, non-exclusive license to any intellectual property that is created under the pilot, and has the ability to negotiate up to an exclusive license. So you'll have a no-cost, royalty-free, non-exclusive, so you'll have freedom to operate, and you will have an option that gives you the first option to exclusively license intellectual property produced under these agreements. Now, you might ask the question, why a standardized agreement? Really to accelerate the process. If there's a lot of negotiation back and forth on terms and conditions, that has the potential to slow down the agreement execution process, and our goal is, by having pre-negotiated terms, to as quickly as possible get these agreements in place and get staff to work for you. And we've already talked about the 2 agreements. The reason is CRADAs are limited to activities where there's a real collaboration between the business and the national lab. And if, rather than a collaboration, the company wishes to provide cost share, then the TAPA is the mechanism of choice. Reporting requirements, again, the Department of Energy has hired a third-party evaluator to assess how the program is progressing, and we'll need to be able to collect data for a period of 5 years. And we think that this will take about 30 minutes of your time each year, so it should be a fairly light touch. We've talked about the fact that there is a requirement for a cost share. In-kind contributions can include, but are not limited to, personnel costs, indirect costs, facilities and administrative costs, value of a service or other resource or third-party in-kind contribution. And you can count forward the time that you expect to incur to provide the evaluation data for 5 years. Let's talk about page limits. We've actually shortened the agreements. The intent is to make it a simpler process for the small business, and also a simpler process for the reviewers. There's now a maximum of 4 pages of text, and we ask that the text that you put together carefully follows the outline for the request for assistance. The reviewers expect to find content in specific places, and you can really help them out and help your request for assistance score well if you put the information they expect in the place that they expected. And then you have 3 pages additionally that you can attach as an appendix to the RFA, and that can be supporting documentation of any kind. I would recommend that you spend part or all of that time with resumes of your key personnel or letters of support from prospective customers or backers that can demonstrate the impact that your project will have. Some additional requirements, we don't want you to send us a 3.5 font on RFA that fits within the 4 pages. We do ask that you limit it to no smaller than 11 point Times New Roman, and we ask that you operate within 1-inch margins. If you have tables and graphics, they can have a smaller font, but we do ask that you make sure that they're legible. And we ask that you save both the RFA and the supporting documentation in a single PDF file, and then name it with this convention, your company's name _ SBV pilot. And if you do that, that'll help us track these effectively once they come in. Okay, let's talk about the outline of the request for assistance. The RFA has two components. The first is a web page series of questions that are filled out, and these are things like the name of your company, the title, a brief description of the project, what's your address, zip code, other details. Is there a laboratory in particular that you would like to work with? And then do you promise that you'll provide a cost share and that you're a small business, that sort of thing. So these are demographic and qualification questions that will find their way into a database that will help us to sort and track various aspects of the applicants. The real scoring, though, takes place on the 4-page plus 3 pages of accompanying material that you write in response to the questions in the outline. And you upload those with this little link on the left-hand side of the page. So the majority of the scoring is going to come from that part of the application. So let's talk about what's going to be in the RFA. And again, this is the part that you will write in Word and convert to a PDF. The first thing is the company overview. Now, if you look at the score sheet, it doesn't seem like the company overview necessarily is going to be a big part of the scoring. And strictly speaking, that's the case. But I would liken this to the elevator speech that an entrepreneur has, or the beginning of your pitch if you're trying to raise capital. This is where you capture the imagination of your reviewer. So I really would encourage you to thoughtfully think about a crisp, interesting, exciting summary of your company's mission and why your company is impactful, and how it is aligned with the goals of this program. So this is your elevator pitch, and even though it doesn't necessarily have a big score attached to it, I think this is where you introduce yourself to the reviewer, and this is very important. Now, the problem definition or the problem statement certainly is an important part of the scoring criteria, and this is where you describe the challenge that your company is facing and how this assistance, if it's provided, will help you overcome that challenge. It's really important to remember that these requests for assistance are reviewed by technical experts. And so it's important in writing your problem definition, you convey that you understand the problem, and you convey that if the assistance that you request is provided, your company has the wherewithal to make use of the results of that to go off and do important things in the marketplace. So problem definition, it's important that the problem you describe be an important problem, and it's important that you demonstrate that you understand your problem and you understand the impact of successfully solving the problem. And then we talk about project impact, and this is describe how this project, if it's successful, will contribute to one or more of the EERE mission areas. So again, this is looking at the alignment with the DOE mission and the fact that if this funding is deployed, your company will help the department meet some of its mission goals. Okay, the next part of the outline, describe the use of project results. This is how you specifically plan to use these results. And again, specificity is important. And again, going back to the previous section, impact is important. How will these results help you to go out and do great things in the marketplace? Then list the key members of your team. This is where you demonstrate that your company is well positioned to take advantage of the results of this work. And it's particularly important if you plan to provide some or all of your cost share via in-kind work. And that means then that your team will need to be a participant in the work that's being performed. And so it's important to demonstrate that your team has the qualifications and experience and infrastructure, frankly, necessarily to do its part of the collaboration. And then the last is the cost share. Describe how your company will provide its cost share contribution. One thing that's important to recognize, and you'll find this in the notice of opportunity, the 20% requirement is 20% of the total. And so I believe that works out to being 25% of the part that DOE contributes. So you look at the DOE contribution plus your contribution, is in the denominator, and the numerator is your contribution, and that should be 20%. And that's well described in the Notice of Opportunity. Okay, let's talk about scoring. I've said this several times. I want to say it one more time. There are 9 technology areas that have been defined by the Department of Energy for this program. These areas are the areas that Congress funds, so the money that is sent to the Department of Energy comes with already labeled with one of these technology areas. And since the funding for this program comes from those pools of money, it's important that when the money is spent, that we can trace it back to its origins with the way that it's spent. So if the money came to us from Congress for advanced manufacturing, then the successful small business voucher application will have to clearly show that it's work to be done in that space. So again, encourage you to read the Notice of Opportunity. Sometimes it's difficult if you're not familiar with the Department of Energy to really understand what their mission goals are and how what you're doing is aligned with it. And so I would encourage you to take a look at the EERE strategic plan. This is EERE's statement of the work that it wants to do in its mission areas. You can follow this link. If you don't have this in front of you, just Google EERE strategic plan and it pops up. Okay, in terms of scoring, we have 3 sections that are equally weighted. The first is the potential for impact. The second is the definition of the problem. And the third is team and resources. And so our reviewers will review your RFAs and assign scores in each of these areas. So let's talk about potential for impact. This is broken into 3 sections. The first is mission. This is the extent to which solving the stated problem will enable achievement of the goals described in the technology areas of the Notice of Opportunity. So again, we're going back to that space that it's a requirement essentially that the work performed under the small business voucher be aligned with the DOE mission space that you've selected. The second is innovation. What is the extent to which solving this problem represents a significant market improvement? And the third is market impact. What's the extent to which solving the problem will lead to a successful product and company? How adequate and specific and reasonable are the impacts of solving the stated problem? So here's a case again where the RFA will be reviewed by experts, and so you want to make sure that when you're describing the impacts, it's believable and also enough detail is provided for it to be reasonable to expect your company to be able to provide that impact. And then the extent to which solving the problem will result in a high-value product or solution that, in the best case, transforms the industry. So impact is the first criteria. The next is the product definition, and this really goes to are you proposing a problem that is important? Have you done a good job describing the problem and demonstrating that you understand the problem and understand the impact of solving the problem? And then have you proposed or described a valid technical issue which can reasonably be solved within the budget and scope of this program? So it is important to realize that the maximum vouchers cover up to about 1 year's cost of a mid to senior researcher. So we don't want to propose solving a problem that is much greater than that level of effort can address. And the last is the team and resources of the small business. So want to take a look at the capabilities of the small business, be confident that the team can address the proposed project, can take advantage of the results of the work that's being performed. And in particular, if you're proposing to do an in-kind contribution, make sure that the resources are available for the company to do its part. All right, let's talk about the RFA submission process. If you have not done so already, the important first step is simply to register. So go to svv.org, and in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a link that says register. So click on register, and then you'll be asked to provide an email address, choose your language of choice, and then there's a little math problem in this case to filter out the robots. So answer those 3 questions and hit register in the lower left. Then you will receive almost instantaneously an email from the Small Business Vouchers pilot. And when you open that email, you'll see this link in blue that says, yes, this is my email. So click, yes, this is my email. And then you will be sent back to the Small Business Voucher webpage, and this box will pop up, and there you enter your full name, your password, and confirm your password. Hit save, and you will be registered, and you will be logged in. Alrighty, once you have done that, and once you have written your request for assistance and turned it into a PDF, then you're ready to go. And then in the, I believe, upper right hand and upper lower hand of the SBV webpage, you certainly can't miss it. You'll see a black box that says Submit Voucher Request. So you click that, and then you'll see this same template that I showed you earlier, and you'll see on the lower left where it says Upload File. You click that button, and then the standard little pop-up window that gives you a directory of your computer, and then you choose the file that you want to upload, and then you upload it, and then you fill out the questions that are in the template. Once you have done that, you go to the bottom, and then you have a button that says Submit. You click Submit, and then you have completed the process. Certainly wait until you get an email that confirms that the submission was successful. Something that is new with this round that we didn't have before is this orange button that says Same as Draft. When we were doing the webinars for the round one, we had to ask people to set aside time to completely fill out the form and hit Submit, because there wasn't the ability to save it as a draft. Now we do have the ability to save it as a draft. I've tested it a couple of times and it seems to work, so that should be handy. And then the checklist. Confirm eligibility on the sbv.org website. Make sure that your company is a company that is eligible to participate in this program. I'll say it again, carefully read the notice of opportunity and make sure that the RFA that you put together is responsive to that notice. Create a login on sbv.org. Prepare your request using the provided template. Have your request ready. Submit voucher on the sbv.org page. Fill out the online form and upload your request as a single PDF. And this in one sitting, I think, is no longer applicable now. I think if you need it, you can save it as a draft and come back to it. This didn't always happen in round one, so very important. Make sure you hit the submit button at the bottom and then wait for the confirmation receipt email. We have a number of people who are waiting, ready, willing, and able to help you answer questions as you go along. For general information about the program, please contact David Kiston. He's at Sandia National Laboratory. His email for this purpose is info@sbv.org, and his telephone number is shown. And then for each of the 9 technology areas, we have experts at the national laboratories that are coordinating activities for those technology areas available to you. So please feel free to contact these people. They're able to help connect you to researchers so that you can have some initial conversations about what a small business voucher project might look like, and then also we're good sounding boards. So please take advantage of these resources. Certainly one of the goals of this program is to make sure that you as a small business have access to the experts you need to put together a compelling request for assistance. And with that, I will take your questions. I see we have a number here. And if I didn't mention this earlier, but please note that there is a comment function on the BlueJeans app, and if you have questions, it's in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free. Okay, question here: round 3 ends before round 2, so there actually will likely be a little bit of overlap between round 3 and round 2. Oh, I see what you're saying. So what I meant to convey on that slide is the timing of the start of round 3, but round 3 will not end before round 2. It'll have a similar notionally 20-week runtime, and we just need to back away from whatever date that we need to make sure that we can squeeze it all in. Round 2 will start before round 3. I'm sorry, round 3 will start before round 2 ends, and we'll do our best to provide as much feedback to the round 2 applicants before round 3 is up and running. Okay, are for-profit businesses structured as LLCs eligible? They certainly are. Do solutions to safety issues, e.g. solar fires, have a priority? I wouldn't say they have a priority. I would say if it is an important problem that falls within EERE mission space, and I don't know enough, frankly, to answer the question about solar fires having a priority or falling within that mission space. But if it is within the mission space, then it certainly would be well received, but I wouldn't say that it has a priority. In the notice of opportunity, the time of submission closure states 11:59 Pacific time. It was mentioned that it should be Eastern time. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Eastern time is the correct answer, and we will certainly correct the web page. I appreciate you pointing that out. If a small business technology is applicable to two areas, is it okay to submit two proposals that are identical, and will it be reviewed twice? So yes, it is okay to submit two proposals to two different applications. It will most likely be reviewed twice because we have different review teams for each technology area. Certainly only one will be funded, and that happened actually once in round one, and the program offices got together to decide which one was funded, since that particular RFA was actually selected by both. So yes, you can do that. Let's see. Problem definition 33% says extent to which applicant discusses and demonstrates understanding of key technical and commercial challenges. That could easily be 4 pages just for this. How much is expected for 33% full marks? Yep, that's the challenge. I think a succinct problem statement that demonstrates a understanding of the problem and its implications is critical. It's true that you won't have the space to build a scientific rationale for why what you're claiming is true. And certainly I wouldn't spend more than a third or so of the available space on the problem statement. So I think that well-written response or well-written problem statement that is concise and demonstrates understanding is the requirement. And I do appreciate that we have competing goals here. One is to gather enough information to do a good job selecting the most promising request for assistance, and at the same time minimize the effort that we're asking the businesses to put out in order to have access to this opportunity. And we'll see how that plays out. Okay, can the results generated by the National Lab as part of the voucher program be kept confidential, or would they be made available in the public domain? Okay, data created by the National Laboratory under the voucher program can be treated and will be treated as creative protected information. And so that's information that will be kept out of the public domain for, I believe, a period of 5 years, after which it will go into the public domain. If it's data that your company created, then that's yours and it doesn't have to go into the public domain. I believe that's true. The bottom line is, because these are federal dollars that are producing the research results at the laboratory, we can't protect them forever, but we can protect them for up to 5 years. Where in the RFA would you like to discuss estimated project costs? In the problem definition? I don't believe it's important for you to spend a lot of time on project costs. In this case, I think a problem statement and working toward a statement that reasonably fits within the maximum budget of the request for assistance would be the way to go at this stage. If you are selected as a semifinalist and work with a laboratory to write the statement of work, that will be the time when you begin to put together a budget and capture the project cost. I think for a lot of small businesses, the national labs aren't well understood, and I think it would be difficult to assess the small businesses on the accuracy with which they estimate the cost of the national lab. So if you're selected as a semifinalist, then you'll have an opportunity to work with the lab to define the statement of work, and then set the budget so that you're comfortable with the matching requirements or with the cost share requirements. So I wouldn't spend a lot of effort on the cost for this RFA. Okay. Okay, we are a small business working in the area of integrating renewables. We've identified an algorithm with the National Lab that we think should be developed further. This work will be done jointly with the lab and the small business. Is this eligible for small business as the original algorithm is coming from the lab? Yes, particularly if the company has a license or other path forward to take the algorithm to market, then this sounds like it might fit very nicely in that it's clearly a collaborative activity between the laboratory and the company that leverages the capabilities of the National Lab. So just on that brief read, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be a good choice. Since most research capabilities available within NREL are also available in the private sector, how do you credibly state that only NREL has the capability? I'm not sure my colleagues at NREL would agree with that. Typically, I answer that question by looking at the combination of specific capabilities, portfolio of capabilities, and capabilities and expertise of the researchers that are staffing those facilities. And that combination, I think, often is unique. And certainly, if you're operating in that space for the purpose of this program, then it qualifies as leveraging the unique capabilities of the laboratory. Are you looking for citations as backup to the problem statement? Certainly, a couple of well-selected references, footnotes can strengthen the proposal, but it's not critical, and I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about it. If you're saying, yes, that's citations. Now, letters of support as a reference, on the other hand, I think if you have one of those, that certainly strengthens the proposal. What is the value cost of 1 year of mid to senior level researcher? Need to know for cost sharing and want to build 20% into the next round of funding. You know, there's some variability across the lab system. As a rule of thumb, I would say that, and this is in broad strokes, $250,000 to $300,000 is not a bad estimate of annual cost of a researcher. We're a small business. We talked about that. Can we identify in our proposal the national laboratory we want to work with? You can. In fact, you have a place in the web page to choose the laboratory that you would like to work with. And certainly there's an effort to honor that request. At the same time, in the review process, the reviewers look carefully at the expertise at the laboratories, at the capabilities at the laboratories, and the goal is to match the companies with the best resource to solve their problem. And we recognize that proximity can be important, and that's a factor. But the other factor is making sure that we are sending you to the laboratory that is best able to solve your specific problem. Can you give an estimate of the percentage of applications in this round which will be funded? You know, that's so variable. I believe when I read the press release, there were several hundred in round one, and you saw that there were 33 that were funded. We expect a similar kind of ratio in round two, but this is still very much a pilot, and we're learning as we go. Let's see, I skipped some questions, I'm sorry. Can we quantify the cost share in kinds in terms of the salary needed to fund our continued research and collaboration? Does the time period have to match the time period during which participating lab is carrying on? So you certainly can charge the salary, overhead, benefits of your staff, full cost of your staff as a cost share. That's a very appropriate and commonly used source of cost share. It is important that the work that you do as a part of the collaboration fall within the period of the CRADA, because that is your contribution to this contract. So it doesn't have to happen at the same rate, but it does need to happen within the period of the CRADA. Let's see. Is this program more structured toward companies that have a specific product rather than technology that is still in the lab? No. If we look at the demographics of the companies that submitted requests for assistance in round one, the vast majority did not yet have products in the marketplace, or were just bringing products to the marketplace. So if you have a prototype and you are making good progress towards going to market, and the assistance you're requesting is important to help you get that product to market, then that really does fall very nicely within the space that we expect for this program to support. Okay. So there was one question is, what was the breakdown of funding levels in round one? Were most projects funded up to the maximum or less? There's quite a bit of variability, actually. And from my side, and I wasn't a reviewer, a company that sets a level that is appropriate for a problem that doesn't just go for the max, to some extent demonstrates an understanding of the problem rather than simply trying to max out the program opportunity. So I would encourage you, particularly when you begin working with the National Lab to write the statement of work, to give some thought to properly scoping the problem and requesting funding levels that are appropriate for the question you're trying to answer. And we certainly did fund some at the maximum level, but there were also quite a number that were funded at lesser amounts. I've tried 3 times and cannot get registered. I do not get a confirmation email. Okay, I would suggest that you contact David Kiston, whose number is provided. Let's see if I've got it here, for the general information, and he will get you to the right person. Likely we'll need to connect you with some of the technical folks at IdeaScale who are hosting this SBV.org, but we'll get that fixed for you. Just please reach out to David. Where or when can I access the offline version of this webinar? We hope in the next day or two to have this up on YouTube, and certainly a link to that will be provided. And also we'll provide the slides. If you'd like the slide deck faster, please feel free to send me an email. My email address is paulusmj@ornl.gov. That's paulusmj@ornl.gov. Can you resubmit to update your application like EER? I don't believe we have that capability. I would ask that you think of punching the submit button as jumping out of the airplane and it's gone. To whom should the support letter be addressed? That's up to you. Often I've seen support letters addressed to the CEO of the company that describes either a prospective customer's excitement about the technology or something like that. So if it's addressed to you, or you could address it to the reviewers, but I would just have them address it to the CEO of the company. Are labs assigned by subject area? For example, is PNNL the only lab participating in bioenergy? So there are a number of labs who are operating in each of the technology areas, so it is not a one-to-one match. If you contact the the point of contact that's provided on the actually on this slide. Those folks are in place to help you find the right person at the lab that's most appropriate for the work that you want to do. So it wouldn't be at all surprising, for example, for you to contact somebody, Jennifer Palmer at Oak Ridge for advanced manufacturing. And if you ask for work in a space that Oak Ridge doesn't do, but another laboratory does, then Jennifer would connect you to the right person at the other laboratory. So there are a number of labs have overlapping capabilities, and it's not a one-to-one map. So an advanced battery technology could apply as solar, wind, buildings, and or vehicles. So I want to be careful. I would suggest that you contact these contact folks that are more specifically engaged with the different technology areas to make sure that's true. Strictly speaking, what you've written is correct, but I would touch base with these points of contact to find out where you have the best fit, and in particular, where the technology that you're working on has the best fit within a program area. Most research capabilities available, we talked about that. So how to ask a question, I assume that that's regarding asking questions as you go through the process. Again, for general information, David Kiston is serving as the point of contact for all of the laboratories. And then for the specific technology areas on the screen now, you'll see the points of contact. So the results of a TAPA, I believe, also have the 5-year confidentiality period. Is the program more structured? We talked about that. This is correct. This is, I guess the funding only goes to the National Laboratory. Does any portion of the money go to the small business? No. The purpose of this program is to provide money to be spent for the small business's benefit at the National Laboratory. So that's why it's called a voucher program. Effectively, you have a voucher up to a certain value to come to the National Laboratory to fund work to be done on your behalf. Is it reasonable to include multiple problems in one application targeted to the same technology? I would be careful. As you know, we only have 4 pages, so I would recommend a fairly targeted application. If you have synergies, that's good. This is a judgment call, but this is intended to fund work notionally at the level that one person can do full-time or 2 people can do collaborating half-time, that scale of a problem. So I wouldn't overburden the request for assistance with too many disparate problem statements. I think you want to choose something that's the single most important problem for your company that you would like help solving. Let's see. Let's see if you can read this. Just typed my email address. So to confirm, information we submit in our application will not be confidential. So please do not put proprietary information in your application. Our intent is for it not to be made publicly available, but we can't guarantee that, and so it's critically important that you do not put any proprietary information in your request for assistance. Okay, I want to align testing of my product with currently installed National Labs field equipment. How can I find what capabilities are currently available at the labs? Again, for geothermal, your best point of contact would be David Kiston at Sandia National Laboratory, and he can get you to the right people either at Sandia or at other national laboratories. Oh, goodness. Let's see. Does a voucher cover hardware costs that the lab might? Yes, absolutely. If there are materials or even equipment that need to be purchased for the purpose of performing the work, then then those materials and equipment can be purchased under the voucher. All right, I think that gets it. You have my email address. I've posted it. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to contact me. Certainly contact the people on this information page. Uh, Thank you very much for your interest in working with the National Laboratories. We certainly appreciate your interest and really look forward to collaborating with you. Have a great afternoon. Can I mute your mic? Let's see.